PaiPan Pharmaceuticals in association with Higher Secondary Principals Forum.
Hello students, in the last class we have done the 4 market structures, that is perfect competition market, monopoly market, monopolistic competition market and oligopoly market. Now in this class let us see how the equilibrium price is being decided under a perfect competition market. Now there are various forces which interact in order to bring about the equilibrium price. Now what is this equilibrium? Equilibrium is a balance that is maintained in order to come to a particular price for a product which is sold in the market. So let us understand what is market equilibrium and how we obtain the market equilibrium price. Market equilibrium under perfect competition. In a perfectly competitive market, the equilibrium price is determined by the interaction of the demand and the supply curves in the market. In your earlier chapters of demand and supply, you must be already aware of the demand curves and the supply curves. Now these demand and supply curves interact with each other in order to bring us the equilibrium price. Equilibrium price is determined at the point where demand and supply curves intersect each other. Now in order to study this equilibrium price, let us look at the assumptions of the equilibrium. As I said, you already know about the relation between the demand and the quantity demanded and the price, which gives the demand curve. The demand curve should always have a negative slope. This is one of the assumptions of market equilibrium. That means it shows a negative relation between the quantity demanded and the price. The next assumption is the supply curve should always have a positive slope. This shows a positive relation between the quantity supplied and the price. Keeping these assumptions in mind, let us move on to the market equilibrium or how we determine the equilibrium price. In order to obtain equilibrium price, we first have the schedule which shows the price, the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied. If you see here in the price column, we find that as the price raises from 1 to 2, the quantity demanded reduces from 50 units to 40 units. Now this shows a negative relation between price and quantity demanded. This shows that there is an inverse relation between price and quantity demanded, as we see that the price further increases from 2 to 3, the quantity demanded further falls from 40 to 30. A further rise in the price from 3 to 4 and then from 4 to 5. As a result, there is a further fall in the quantity demanded from 30 to 20 and then from 20 to 10. Now if you see the first 2 columns, you will find that as the price has continuously gone up, we find that the quantity demanded has continuously gone down. Similarly, we also have a relation between the price and the quantity supplied. We find that as the price rises from 1 to 2, the quantity supplied also rises from 10 to 20. With a further rise in the price from 2 to 3 and so on, we find that the quantity supplied also rises from 20 to 30, from 30 to 40 and then to 50. So if we consider the first and the third column, that is the price and the quantity supplied, we find that with a continuous rise in the price, there is a increase or rise in the quantity supplied by the seller. This shows a positive relation between price and quantity supplied. Now based on this schedule, we are going to draw the in the diagram we have, as you have already seen in the earlier chapters, we draw the demand curve with the help of the price and the quantity demanded. We are plotting these two columns, and with that we derive the demand curve, which is DD. This is the demand curve that we derive with the help of the first and the second column, that is the price and the quantity demanded. Similarly, we draw the supply curve, which is given by SS. Here we take the help of the first and the third column, that is we are plotting the price on the y axis and the quantity supplied on the x axis. For instance, if we see the at price 1, the quantity supplied is 10. So, at the price 1, the quantity supplied is 1. So, the first point will be taken here. This is the way we are plotting the demand curves and the supply curve. Now, the plotting of the demand and the supply curve you have already done in your demand and your supply chapters. Now, since we are now looking at the equilibrium, as I said earlier, the equilibrium price is that price at which the demand and the supply curves intersect at each other. So, if you see the demand curve and the supply curve, that is the DD curve and the SS curve, the point of intersection is at point E. So, you have this as the equilibrium point. Now, here if you take from this point, you take a horizontal line to the y axis. This is the equilibrium price which is obtained, which in this case is 3. Similarly, from this point, if we take a vertical line down to the quantity axis or the x axis, we find that 30 is the quantity demanded and supplied. So, this is the equilibrium quantity. So, 3 is the equilibrium price and 30 is the equilibrium quantity. Now, we see that in a perfectly competitive market, there could be different fluctuations in the price. That means, the price could go higher or the price could go lower. So, let us see each of these cases where the price is going up or the price is going down. Now, in the case where the price goes up, that is from 3 to 4, if you go horizontally, you will find that the supply here is more while the demand is less. We find that the supply is 40 units while the demand is only 20 units. So, that means there is excess supply in this type of a situation. When the price rises above the equilibrium price, there is an excess supply. The supply is more and the demand is less. This pushes since there are more sellers selling more product, the competition among the suppliers pushes the price down until it settles at the equilibrium price. Since there are less demanders for the product and more suppliers, there is competition among the suppliers, and this competition pushes the price down until it settles down at the equilibrium price. Similarly, if we take the other instance where the price goes down from 3, when the price goes to 2, it falls. If you draw a horizontal line here, in this case we find it is a case of excess demand. That means the demand is more and the supply is less. If you see on the demand curve, the demand is 40 units while the supply is 20 units. So, in this case there is an excess of demand. That means there are more people who are demanding this product while there is a shortage in the supply. As a result of that, there are a few products and many buyers for that particular product. And we find that when there is a shortage, there is a competition among the demanders, among the consumers for that particular product which is in short supply. This competition among the consumers pushes the price up, so that again it settles at the equilibrium price. Okay, so whenever there are fluctuations or movements away from the equilibrium price, whether the price is higher or whether the price is lower, there is either competition among the suppliers or there is competition among the consumers which pushes the price down or it pushes the price up, so that again the price settles at an equilibrium price E. So, in the diagram we find that At the equilibrium if you see, it is a point at which the demand curve and the supply curve intersect, and the corresponding price and the corresponding quantity is the equilibrium price, which in this case you can see is OP, and the equilibrium quantity, which in this case is OQ, or in this example the equilibrium price is 3 and the equilibrium quantity is 30. If you see in the schedule also, you will find that at the price 3, both the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied are equal, that is they are 30 at price 3. So, this becomes the equilibrium quantity and this becomes the equilibrium price. Now, with this equilibrium, there could be some changes in the equilibrium conditions. That means, when the demand and the supply changes, there could be different shifts in the demand and shifts in the supply. Then in the next part, we will see how these shifts will affect the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity supplied. So, now let us move on to the diagrams showing the changes in demand and supply. So, let us see now how the changes in demand and supply will bring about a change in the equilibrium price and quantity. Now, we need to see 6 different changes. The first one that we will see is changes in demand. The first change in demand is an increase in demand. In the case of an increase in demand, as you know, the increase in demand takes place because of factors other than price. Other factors could be like a change in the income, a change in the population, etc. So, before seeing the increase in the demand, we need to take the equilibrium diagram once again. We have the x-axis and the y-axis. As we have seen in the earlier diagram, you have the quantity demanded and supplied on the x-axis and the price on the y-axis. Again, we have the demand curve DD and the supply curve SS. As we have seen in the earlier diagram, the equilibrium is maintained at a point where the demand curve intersects the supply curve, that is, we have the point E. Corresponding to this, we have the equilibrium price P and the equilibrium quantity Q. Now, this is the basic equilibrium that we had just seen in the earlier diagram. Now, we will look at the change in the demand, that is the increase in the demand. When there is an increase in the demand, we know that the demand curve would shift to the right. That means there would be an outward shift of the demand curve. So, let us take a new demand curve . D1, D1. Now, this new demand curve has come because there is an increase in the demand. The demand curve has moved outward. The increase may be due to different factors other than price. Now, here there is a change in the demand with the supply remaining constant. The supply has not changed. So, that is why we find that the supply curve has not shifted, the supply curve is as it is. So now we look at the original supply curve, that is SS, and the new demand curve, that is D1, D1. Now where do these two curves intersect each other? Again, the point of equilibrium is at the point of intersection between the new demand curve and the original supply curve. So if we see the original supply curve SS and the new demand curve D1, D1, the point of intersection is here, which we call as the new equilibrium E1. Now if we draw lines towards from point E1 to the x-axis and to the y-axis, we find that the new quantity Q1 and the new price P1. From the diagram, we can see that the price has gone up from P to P1 and the quantity has also increased from Q to Q1. Now this change has taken place because of an increase in demand, supply remaining constant. So in the diagram, I will again repeat that in the diagram we have an increase in the demand. As a result of that, the demand curve shifts outward, or an outward shift of the demand curve from DD to D1, D1, supply remaining constant at SS, as a result of which the equilibrium point shifts from E to E1, and correspondingly you have a change in the quantity where quantity increases from OQ to OQ1 and the price rises from OP to OP1. This is the first instance of a change in the demand. The second change which we see is a decrease in the demand. Now with a decrease in the demand, again the decrease in the demand takes place because of factors other than price. The decrease may take place because of a lowering of the income or reduction in the population, etc. So let us again draw the basic equilibrium diagram where we have the x-axis, the y-axis. On the x-axis you have the quantity demanded and supplied. On the y-axis we have the price, the original demand curve DD and the original curve SS. We have the equilibrium, again it is at the point where the demand curve intersects the supply curve, that is at point E. Corresponding to this, we have the equilibrium quantity OQ and the equilibrium price OP. Now in this case, as I said, we are going to look at a decrease in the demand. With a decrease in the demand curve shifts inward. With increase, it shifted outward. With a decrease, it will shift inward. So we draw the new demand curve D1, D1. Again, here we see that the change takes place only in demand, supply remaining constant. So supply curve will not shift, it remains the same. Now we look at the original supply curve, that is SS, and the new demand curve D1, D1. Now where do these two curves intersect? Both of them intersect at this point, which we have as the new equilibrium E1. This is the new equilibrium E1. Corresponding to that, we draw a line to the x-axis and we get our new quantity. Corresponding to that, when we draw a line to the y-axis, we get the new price, which is P1. So in the diagram, we can see that the quantity has come down from OQ to OQ1, and the price has also come down from OP to OP1. There is a reduction in the price. This change has taken place because of a decrease in demand, supply remaining constant. Next, we will see the third change, that is, now we will see changes in supply. The first change in the case of supply is when there is an increase in supply. Again, we will first draw the original equilibrium which we had drawn in our earlier diagrams. That is, we have the x-axis and the y-axis. On the x-axis, we have the quantity demanded and supplied. On the y-axis, we have the price, and for our original equilibrium price, we have the original demand curve DD and the original supply curve SS. Once again, we mark the point of equilibrium as point E and the corresponding quantities, that is quantity OQ as the equilibrium quantity and OP as the equilibrium price. This is the original equilibrium price and quantity. Now we will see the movement away from this equilibrium. The change that we are taking here is an increase in the supply, demand remaining constant. So in this case, the demand curve is not going to shift. The shift is going to take place in the case of the supply curve. Now the first change is the case of increase in the supply curve. Whenever there is an increase in the supply curve due to factors other than price, for instance, there could be a fall in the government taxation, that could be, or there could be an improvement in the technology, etc. So because of different factors other than price, when the supply increases, that leads to an increase in supply. In this case, the supply curve shifts towards the right, or it shifts outward. So we have an outward shift of the supply curve, and we have the new supply curve S1, S1. Again, the point of equilibrium, the condition remains the same, that is the point of intersection between the demand curve and the supply curve. In this case, we see that we have a new supply curve and the same original demand curve. So we take the point at which the new supply curve intersects the original demand curve, which is this point. So we take this point as the new equilibrium E1. Corresponding to this, the quantity which we get is the new quantity, and corresponding to this, the price that we get is the new price P1. Now in this case, we find that the quantity has risen from OQ to OQ1, while the price has come down from OP to OP1. This is the case when there is an increase in supply or there is an outward shift in the supply curve. The fourth instance that we take is again when there is a change in supply, demand remaining constant, which is a decrease in supply. Let us again draw the basic equilibrium condition where we have the quantity demanded and supplied on the x-axis and the price on the y-axis. Again, we have the original demand curve and the original supply curve, and as we have seen in the earlier diagrams also, the point of equilibrium comes at the point of intersection between the demand curve and the supply curve. Corresponding to that, we have the equilibrium quantity and the equilibrium price, that is OQ as the equilibrium quantity and OP as the equilibrium price. Now, in this case, we are seeing the decrease in the supply. The decrease in the supply may take place due to factors like deterioration in the technology, or there could be increase in the taxes by the government, etc. A decrease in supply takes place because of factors other than price. Now, in this case, when there is a decrease in the supply curve will shift inward. So, let us see the movement of the supply curve. It shifts inward from SS, it shifts to S1, S1. Again, we have the new supply curve and the original demand curve, as we are taking the case of decrease in supply, demand remaining constant. So, let the point of intersection between the original demand curve and the new supply curve, which is here, will be our new equilibrium, that is E1. Again, corresponding to this equilibrium point, we have the new quantity Q1 and we have the new price P1. As we can see in the diagram, when there is decrease in the supply, the quantity demanded and supplied reduces from OQ to OQ1 and the price rises from OP to OP1. So, till now we have seen the 4 changes in which either the demand or the supply is changing. In the first 2 cases, we have seen where only the demand is changing and supply is remaining constant, and the next 2 cases we have seen where the demand remains constant and there is a change in the supply. Now, in the next 2 cases, we will see where there are changes in both demand as well as supply. So, we have now here the increase is such that there is a proportionate increase. That means the proportionate change in the demand is same as the proportionate change in the supply. So, once again we will draw the basic equilibrium where we have quantity demanded and supplied on the x-axis and the price on the y-axis. We have an original demand curve DD and original supply curve SS. Once again, we have the equilibrium point at point E, the equilibrium quantity Q and equilibrium price P. Now, here in this case, we are taking the case where demand and supply both are increasing. So, that is why that means that here there will be a shift in both the curves. That is, the demand curve will shift outward because there is an increase in the demand, and the supply curve will also shift outward because there is an increase in the supply. So, both the curves are shifting in this case. Now, we have to take a note here that both the increases are taking place in the same proportion. So, that is why the shifts in the curves will also it will shift in the same distances. Okay? So, let us take the new demand curve. Since there is an increase in the demand curve, the demand curve will shift outward. There is an outward movement in the demand curve, and the supply curve will also shift out because there is an increase in the supply curve. So, we find that there is an increase in the supply curve, therefore, there is an outward shift in the supply curve. Now, what happens to the price in this case and the quantity? Now, the equilibrium here is again the point of intersection between the demand curve and the supply curve. But in this case now, we have two new curves, that is the new demand curve and the new supply curve. So, the point of equilibrium will be the point of intersection between the new demand curve and the new supply curve. So, that point of intersection is this point E1. Now, if you see this point, let us take it to the x axis, extend it to the x axis. This is the new quantity, and if we extend it to the y axis, we see that the price remains the same. There is no change in the price. So, when there is an equal and proportionate change in demand as well as supply, since there is an increase in demand and supply, the quantity increases from OQ to OQ1. But since the changes, that is demand and supply increase is the same, the price remains the same. The price remains constant only with a subsequent increase in the quantity demanded and supplied. This is the case where the increase takes place in demand and supply. The next change that we will see is the decrease in the demand and the supply. Decrease in demand. Now, here the decrease in the demand and supply again takes place proportionately. That means there is an equal proportionate change in demand and supply. So, for this we will once again draw our equilibrium, quantity and price. On the y axis we take the price, on the x axis we take the quantity demanded and supplied. We take the original demand curve DD, we take the original supply curve SS, and the original equilibrium once again at point E, point of intersection between the demand curve and the supply curve. Original quantity, original price, that is equilibrium quantity and equilibrium price. Now, here we are saying that we are taking a decrease in the demand and supply. Because of a decrease in the demand and the supply, the demand and the supply curve will shift inward, they will move inside. So, we see that this demand curve will shift inwards. So, we have a new demand curve D1 which is an inward movement of the demand curve. Similarly, since there is a decrease in the supply curve will also move inward. Okay, there is an inward movement of the supply curve. So, now we have a new demand curve and a new supply curve. The point of equilibrium again remains, the condition of equilibrium remains the same, that is the point of intersection between the demand curve and the supply curve. Since both have shifted proportionately, we will take the new two demand and supply curves, that is the curve D1 and the curve S1. The point of intersection is here, which is our new equilibrium E1. If you draw a line to the x axis from this point, we will find the new quantity Q1, and we will see that the quantity has gone down. From OQ, it has reduced to OQ1. Why? Because both demand and supply have decreased in the same proportion. However, since both have decreased, the price again remains the same. It is maintained at the same old equilibrium price, that is OP. So, this was the change which we saw when there was a decrease in demand and supply proportionately. So, we have seen 6 changes that have taken place, that is changes in the demand when there is an increase in demand, decrease in demand, changes in supply when there is an increase in supply, decrease in supply, and the last 2 changes which we have seen is where both demand and supply have changed proportionately, that is either there has been an increase in the demand as well as supply, or there has been a decrease in the demand and supply. With this we come to the end of this chapter on producers equilibrium, market structures and price determination.
Prudent Scholars, powered by Lupin Pharmaceuticals.
अब आपकी सुरक्षा आपके हाथों में। ल्यूपी सेफ हैंड सैनिटाइजर, आपका और चेन्नई सुपर किंग्स का फर्स्ट लाइन ऑफ डिफेंस। अब आपकी सुरक्षा आपके हाथों में। ल्यूपी सेफ हैंड सैनिटाइजर, आपका और चेन्नई सुपर किंग्स का फर्स्ट लाइन ऑफ डिफेंस। अब आपकी सुरक्षा आपके हाथों में। ल्यूपी सेफ हैंड सैनिटाइजर, आपका और चेन्नई सुपर किंग्स का फर्स्ट लाइन ऑफ डिफेंस।